Hey everybody, Mac to Monster here. I'm going to be doing a Archon build, and I'm doing this off of my SNS gear, the shock nado shards or wicked wind stunlock build, basically critical mass. And it's going to stay critical mass, ironically, with the Archon. So your gear isn't as bad as you think. The massive amounts of attack speed isn't needed for the most part. And the build is basically geared centrally around Archon and being an Archon. I'll show you my gear. My DPS is higher because I have different passives than I normally do with the critical mass build. As you can see, it's kind of an above average critical mass. I do have 200k damage when I'm in critical mass. Lower intellect because I do have more defensive gear, although I lack armor. That won't hurt as much because I have phenomenal resistances, and in Archon you gain double anyways. And I'll go over that in a second. So this is my critical mass. Obviously, I'm really geared on the wicked wind aspect of it. 2.75% attack speed. So that gets me into the second to top tier of attacks made by a wicked wind. So that's what I went for. And obviously with wicked wind and critical mass you want crits, so I built heavily against crit, and I support it somewhat with some critical hit damage. I don't have a ton of it, which is why the DPS is low. I got a Shantando's Will, and with the wicked winds you're really using life on hit, and so it makes it a little bit different as far as the Archon goes, because life on hit doesn't pay off as much. I have 904 life on hit. It's a little bit low for the DPS, but it's more than enough to keep me alive when I am doing the critical mass build. As you can see, I have no life steal, and that's really kind of an issue, but I've found a workaround. I got more than enough hit points. 42,000 is good. More is better. I actually have really good gear. I mean, it's not top shelf. It's not like I'm sitting there on a 20 or 30 billion build, but I am sitting on a 1.5 billion build. And of course you got the Mempo with critical hit and resist all and high intellect. That's a fortune. I'm using Talrashas for the attack speed, again 9% with resists, high vitality and intellect. Again, that's expensive. This is an expensive neck piece, even though it lacks primary stats. It has max attack speed and crit with a high crit damage, not super high but high enough, and it has life on hits, which is what I need because I got rid of the Stormcrow to get the DPS out of a Mempo. You can see I got pretty good Vile Ward. This is going to carry over to anything, so that was a good piece to invest in. This is a pretty solid piece. It lacks critical hit damage, and again why I'm lower in critical hit damage, but it does have max attack speed and crit with max resist all, a high vitality, and some intellect. So it's obviously a very good piece for the Wicked Wind builds. I crafted this. I got pretty lucky. It's not my best craft. It's my second best craft. Best craft is sitting on the Witch Doctor. But this has high vitality, high intellect, good resist all, really good resist all, extra armor, and crit chance. And I got the Mempo, high attack speed, crit damage, resist all, high intellect for a witching hour. I went with Unity. I needed life on hit, and this gives a ton of damage. Gives me that critical hit damage, gives me some critical hit chance, increased to elites, a decent amount of intellect, and high base damage. That's going to help out later too. This is basically kind of like the amulet, attack speed and crit maxed out, decent amount of critical hit damage and a high amount of life on hit. That's where I get all my life on hit. Obviously in attack speed items I didn't need a 9%er, so I went with an 8%. Can't get one with intellect with resist all. I went with the resist all. So that's why my resistances are so high. And got the Zuminas's trail. Good amount of intellect, you know, full poison damage, some vitality, resist all again. Super Shintado's Force. It's not max, but it's close to max. 200, a little bit over 250 average damage, so it's up there. Some intellect, low attack speed, it's only the 8%, not 9%. But it's got arcane power, 9 arcane power on crit, and 9.5% crit, so that's awesome. And then if I wanted to do the Meteor SNS build, I can do that. And of course, a fantastic Shitado's Will, good amount of intellect. It's got a socket, high damage, and critical hits gain 10 arcane power. Socket's really what's awesome about it, and the higher attack speed. It's not the super fast one. You can get 1.75 Shitado Wills, so you can have less attack speed gear, but you can't get a socket with that. So, yeah, that weapon's a real big chunk of damage. That's basic stats. This Archon build is for, I started it for clearing MP5 or lower because, you know, you're doing higher levels with the SNS build. And the primary important stat or skill that you're using is Shock Pulse with Living Lightning. This is whenever you can't be in Archon. The tendrils, the lightning tendrils that come off this and hit things is phenomenal. Crits a lot. Critical mass works with it really well as long as there's some mobs out there, and it'll get the cooldown of Archon down. You know, 120-second cooldown. You're really looking to kill 120 mobs for critical mass to reduce the cooldown. Or critical hits. You're looking for 120 critical hits, but you'll get a critical hit most likely at MP5. The mob is dead anyway. I broke off the standard. When you're in Archon, you're mostly holding down the right button, sometimes the left button, and you're also trying to hit your explosion off. The right button is the big disintegrate beam. So if it should wear off by holding down that button anyways, I immediately get slow time with a time warp. I reduce their attack speed by 20 and movement speed by 60, and projectiles go 90% less, and enemies caught in the bubble take 20 more damage. You got a couple different other options. I mean, you can attack 10% faster, which doesn't pay off too much. You can reduce the cooldown. You can increase the movement speed, and you can have it cling when they leave the bubble. That doesn't really matter to me. Usually I'm not in the bubble. I'm in the bubble shorter than the duration, which is 8 seconds. And then with critical mass, the bubble comes back up anyways. And so the rest of them are all support things for Archon. Storm Armor probably won't be up the full duration your Archon is. If you want to keep it up, you can always just drop Archon and recast it and then put Archon back up, because by the time this wears off, it's 120 seconds. You'll probably have 120 crits by then. Key function here is, well, with Storm Armor, if you don't have the defenses I have, if you really need defenses, you can go to Energy Armor with Prismatic Armor. If you don't have critical hit chance, you can get some extra critical hit chance with Pinpoint, and you get some extra armor. I don't think you'll find yourself needing it at 5 or less. Higher MPs, I changed this over for the defense. And then magic weapon, a lot of people go with force weapon for the 5% extra weapon damage and the chance to knock back. You can go ahead and do this. However, the whole purpose of this build right here is to support someone with the SNS build and wants to use something else for lower MP farming, or is scared that the rumors of nerfs to the perma-stun coming into place and all of a sudden your gear is useless. It's not necessarily totally useless. I use blood magic. It gives you a 1.5% life steal for 5% damage. It's well worth it. That's kind of a key function there. Standard thing to use is familiar with Spark Flint. It basically increases all your damage by 12%. And then critical mass is kind of central to it, so you can pound down the time on Archon. There are Archon choices. Improved Archon is probably the best, 25% extra damage. Otherwise, you can cast a slow time, you can decrease the cooldown, you can get teleport while with it, or you can blow up when you go into it. Yeah, those are all kind of interesting things, but 25% damage is the standard. Now MP5 less, I go with Glass Cannon. MP10, I go with Blur. Reduce my damage. And I keep the Unstable Anomaly. I mean, right now you could get rid of Unstable Anomaly, go with Temporal Flux because you're going to do a ton of arcane damage, but stuff just dies so fast. I'd rather just have this in case I make a really bad mistake. I don't die, because when I receive fatal damage, I heal to 45% of maximum life and release a shockwave that knocks all enemies' backs and slows them for 60% for 3 seconds. It can happen once a minute. So that's the strength of it. This is MP5. I'll show you just how disgusting this really is. I just destroy things that are bugging me with living lightning. So you can see all those tendrils proccing, the shockwaves from the storm armor going off. And that right there, if Archon was on full cooldown, it would either be off or just about off. So you want to get all 3 of your buffs up. Find some enemies. Oh, there's some enemies. And go into Archon. As you can see, with all this attack speed, this beam just incinerates things. You don't need attack speed for the build anyways. The popular thing is to do a Scorn for lifesteal. And that works phenomenally well too. And you get about the same damage if you get a decent Scorn. Yeah, as you can see, I can just incinerate. I don't need that 5% extra damage. The life cap's going to get me through any kind of trouble that I get in with a rare pack, if I get into trouble. And it's going to pay off in MP10, because you can do this in MP10. That's how big this is. It doesn't work quite like this. I mean, they're all saying that the perma-stun thing is broken. Check this out.
I am so good, I astound myself.
Oh, there's a pack. Oh, flex damage.
remnant there must have wonderful treasure.
So these are where that life stealing is coming in. His life on hit's not hanging out. That was kind of a tougher pack. I didn't even look at it, but I knew it had reflect damage, so you had to be a little cautious with how much damage you're doing to it. So my shotgun armors are about to wear off. So, you know, you get to a point where it came off anyway. You see I get to slow time. And this stuff is just annihilated by that. It's not as good as this, but it's close enough. It'll work in MP10 too. Diablo. There we go. Another reflect damage. Gotta be careful with that. That's much damage. Let's see reflect damage.
Remind me to never die for something.
So that's pretty easy. They're gonna throw a lot of reflect damage out there. That seems to be the go-to skill of all the rare packs now, is reflect damage. My Demon Hunter keeps seeing reflect damage. My Wizard keeps seeing reflect damage. My Monk keeps seeing reflex damage. They either programmed it in there, or there's a mistake and they programmed it too much. My Demon Hunter literally sees 3 to 5 rare packs with reflect damage. So my Archon's that up, and I'll show you how viable this is, so I can slow time around me. Life on hit pays off here. So wanna know why I'm not dying with this stuff? It's Archon.
I'm healed.
It went away. Wanted to show you how little damage you take, at least at this level with the Archon. The Archon. I have to wait till it comes off cooldown to show you, I guess. Whenever it comes off, just rebuff. So I can show you. You transform into being a pure energy for 15 seconds. While in this form, your normal abilities are replaced by the powerful Archon abilities that you're seeing use, and your armor and resistances are increased by 40%. Every enemy killed while in Archon form adds 1 second to duration. So that's why it lasts so long, and that's why sometimes it lasts so little. If there's no mobs around, I'm not killing anything. It's not going to stay up. I mean, I can sit here and do this all day.
I am so good. I astound myself.
A hard fight.
And it was dead that fast, yes.
I am unstoppable.
That's where that life steal's coming in. You never know when you get caught. And it is AP5. It has a challenge to it. So I should say it has the ability to kill you. So that's oops. 5 stacks, go back to town. See how easy it is to break this place. They still do damage, so that life steal's coming in effect again.
How does that feel?
5 stacks, so just kill. I think Revenant Blow is 63 though. Oh, is that? That's just the dungeon. The armor so strong you can actually take a charge.
I've been healed.
So it dropped. If you look, it's already up. Usually when it drops, it's already back up. So that is how good this is. Archon build with SNS gear, shock nado shards, critical mass, wicked wind build, whatever you want to call it. There's a billion names out there. If you got to switch to something for low level farming, this is probably what you want to do. I can't find anything that works better. With life on hit, shock pulse, living lightning is the go-to. Alright guys, I'll talk to you later.